We are live being recorded. We are on YouTube and we are on the channel.
Okay, good morning and welcome to the Village of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeal meeting for Friday, July 14th. The first thing on the agenda, we have the extension of a time request for Robert G. and Kristen S. DeLaMatta, 24 Ocean Avenue. Tom, can you just brief us real quickly on this?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So this is a request for an extension of time for a decision, a determination that was granted by your board. The code has not changed since. If there's any zoning codes, nothing really has changed not at all. So I would have no objection. The situations like this are in somewhat of a way a win-win situation. It's for a accessory dwelling unit. It's a building already in existence that's going to be converted into an accessory dwelling, and the benefit is that both the house and the accessory dwelling would be put on the new innovative alternative septic system with treating the effluent for nitrates.
Thank you. And this is for a 6-month extension. So Pam, should I read this determination now or not determination, but this? Okay. In the application of Robert G. and Kristen S. DeLaMatta, 24 Ocean Avenue, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-8-13-15.1, to grant a 6-month extension of time of the Zoning Board's determination filed August 17th, 2022. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Pam, please poll the board.
Mr. McGurk?
Yes?
Mr. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Rose?
Yes.
Mr. Barris?
Okay, and the,
Is Andy here?
no, Andy is
Oh,
not here.
sorry.
No.
All right, the second determination of the day in the application of Nichols Ocean LLC, terminus of Nichols Lane, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 301-13-11-12, to legalize the enlargement of a deck is approved. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Pam, please poll the board.
Mr. McGurk?
Yes?
Mr. McMullen?
Yes.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yes.
Mr. Rose?
Yes.
Okay. So we have 2 adjournments today for Skylight East LLC, 94 Appoquog Road, till August 11th, 2023. We have Mark K. Webb, 123 Egypt Lane, August 11th, 2023. And now we have the continuation of the hearing for Russell J. DeGate and Noreen R. Sharp, 7 Sherrill Road. And I believe, Russell, we have the affidavits in, so I think you're all set. Can I have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, and Mr. McMullen's going to take over for the Jewish Center of the Hamptons for this matter.
We close it or we adjourned?
We closed the
Yeah.
the adjournments now.
Okay, so as we know, last week we had the hearing. We kept it open for the submission of some additional material that was presented at the meeting. I know we've received more information. Alex, would you like to?
Thanks, Jim. Alex Bolsom here with the Jewish Center. So since the last meeting, we submitted Mike Brody's presentation. We submitted further details on the full premises dark sky compliant lighting plan. We gave details and cut sheets on the pavilion lighting itself. We also submitted a sound map to show the sound as it decreases over distance from the pavilion, which we'll touch on in a little bit, and we provided some additional letters of support. I do want to start out by clarifying a couple of points here, and highlighting some fairly minor changes since the last meeting. So we did rotate the orientation of where the rabbi is going to speak. He's really speaking at what I'm calling the west side of the pavilion, out like with the grove to his back, facing east. That changed the number of speakers. There's now 14 speakers instead of 17 because orientation of the speakers changed. Again, I'll ask Mike to dive further into that. And I do want to clarify the number of lights. Again, because of the orientation change, actually 88 was closer to the number. Architect Richard Datner can also explain the the thoughts behind here, but actually with the change in orientation, we're actually at 92 lights. Again, these are 14-watt bulbs, very small bulbs that point directly down and are set to basically provide 20 to 25 foot candles at 30 inches off the ground. Just enough for the prayer books when sitting. I do want to say that plans were kind of set in motion shortly after our last meeting to meet with some of the Borden Lane neighbors, with Jameson's clients, and we did actually meet this past Wednesday with Jameson and Debbie Buell and Michael Haberman. So it was a good, friendly meeting overall. At that meeting, well, let me say this. Instead of arguing the points, obviously, of Sound Sense's recent submission, or arguing the math or the science behind it, what we did is we went into that meeting saying, look, we're going to use your math. We're going to offer to bring the decibel max from 95, which we offered at the last meeting, to 85. And the map that we submitted, that Walbridge generated for us, that shows the sound emanating out using Sound Sense's Table 4 calculations, and basically gets us to, I think, are more than reasonable points, using that math at 304 feet from the property line, or at 304 feet from the pavilion, which is the property line of the Buell Lane neighbors. That gets us to 53 decibels, which happens to be the background decibels that Sound Sense calculated at the property line there. And at 384 feet at the residence, we're at 50 decibels, again below the ambient background noise. Again, Mike Brody will touch on some of these points a little bit better. So I think, at the end of the day, the 85 decibels more than gets it done and should alleviate any reasonable concerns here. I still understand that there are other concerns about possibilities of weddings and things like that. And obviously we're saying, yeah, that might happen at some point. We're not ruling out any, like I said, non-religious celebrations. I won't get into what the rabbi explained the last meeting, how we're limiting that to members and things like that. No need to rehash that, I know, but I do want to say that just as the Jewish Center has protections from all the Borden Lane and other adjoining neighbors from one-off events, the neighbors have the same protections. I mean, namely, you've got the need to file a special gathering permit for any non-religious celebration, which we acknowledge would include weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvah celebrations.
I think the difference is that there's one neighbor there where there's, I don't know how many congregants that could be proposing to have a party, or, that's a big difference. And since the rabbi said that there's not those parties going on there, is there a reason that the applicant wouldn't covenant to just use it for services, religious services and educational programs?
Yeah, I would say, Phil, we don't find that to be a fair ask. We're not asking the Borden Lane neighbors, and there's obviously many of them, to say, well, you guys can't ever have a wedding on your property. Again, we don't historically have a lot of weddings. Any wedding celebration that we do have is going to have to go for that permit. If we have a history of a lot of these celebrations and noisy celebrations, we're not going to get the permit, nor should we, because we're sitting here saying in good faith this isn't going to be an issue. So there is a big check right there. If every time we have a celebration and the neighbors call and have a legitimate complaint about that, I imagine the village is going to take a hard look at any of these applications, particularly in terms of frequency. Also, we offered to send to the neighbors a calendar of our events, most of which aren't going to be noisy, but they'll know when we have planned gatherings. And specifically, anytime we do apply for a permit, for a special events permit, we said that we would reach out to the Borden Lane neighbors and let them know we're applying for that permit and what the date would be. So they would have, some heads up, etc. Basically trying to keep the lines of communication open. The rabbi's shared his cell phone number with the neighbors. So again, a lot of safeguards here. And I'll leave it at that, and maybe ask Mike to address the sound and how things stand, or how things look at an 85 decibel max.
Before we get to the sound, I had one more question. Parking and safety, that was brought up by several of the neighbors last time around. Has that been addressed in any way? Is there any thought to, on when I drive by, even now, there's a lot of cars every day out there. Is there any thought to when there are large celebrations that you have parking attendants, for lack of a better term, so that the neighbors' driveways aren't blocked? Is there any thought to, you have a lot of space in the front yard where they could reconfigure, the structural blocks where the grass grows through, so you still have a beautiful grass lawn, yet it can support cars?
So I might ask either the rabbi or Harry to come and talk about how, because there are some parking assistance, and how they're currently parking for large events. I kind of know, but better to hear it from someone dealing with it firsthand. Because this is not generating more people on the premises, like it's just open for on a regular basis. I'm not talking about special events now, because again, those.
And we don't know that it's not going to generate more people.
I don't think we're getting any more members because we have the ability to have outdoor services right now, but.
People may attend. There may be more educational events in the outdoor space, so we can't say with any certainty that we're not going to have a greater volume of people.
Yeah, well, again, so for any yes. The short answer to your question is, for any bigger events, there are things that are done to address the parking. I don't know, Josh, do you want to talk about? Arthur can mention.
As you know,
She's got to swear you in.
Arthur Melman, I'm a member of the Board of Trustees at the Jewish Center.
Your address?
99 Georgia Close Road, East Hampton.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Okay. I can truthfully say that we do have big events, which are major holidays, and let me just describe our parking for that. We have several ingresses for parking off the street. The biggest one is we also own, as you know, 30 Woods, and we can park, I can't give you the exact number, but a lot of cars in that area. We also has, as you look at the Jewish Center, on the left, a big grass field, which during the time we have the big tent up there, we can't park cars there, but we also do have an ingress there, which is a shared ingress. And if we were using a pavilion rather than having a high holidays tent, we could park cars there. So there's room for really hundreds of cars to be parked in those areas, and we do use them. So we have experience with that. In some of the high holidays, we also have an arrangement with the village where we can park at the beach and then have a shuttle back and forth. But that's not used very much because we can pretty much handle all the cars in those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had one question. Were the, well, both. The people who were here last meeting from Woods Lane that were concerned about parking, were they invited to the meeting you had on Wednesday?
Our talks had only been with really through Jameson, with Jameson's clients. It was, no, we didn't
Okay.
We didn't reach out to all the objecting neighbors for that.
Okay.
Okay. Before we go on, I would just like to ask that anybody that would like to speak today, if they can add new information and not repeat old information from last month, just to keep this meeting moving. Jameson, would you like to speak next?
Good morning, everyone. Jameson McWilliams from Crouch McWilliams Law Group at 10 Pantico Road in East Hampton. Yes, my clients and I met with the Jewish Center this past Wednesday. It was a pretty friendly discussion, and we are trying to continue to be good neighbors and hopefully, have this all work out where they are not adversely impacted. Mostly the two concerns that we raised were the lighting and particularly the sound. The the takeaway from the meeting, in addition to, they did get the rabbi's cell phone number, they discussed being added to the email blast so that they're aware of the regularly scheduled programs, or the events, was this 85 decibel limit number. I will say that, two things about that. After we left the meeting, our sound sense consultant, Dr. Bonnie Schnitta, she's here. Hopefully she will get an opportunity to speak and, explain her report. Bonnie and Mike Brody, their AV consultant, I believe that they did speak subsequent to our meeting. It's my understanding that they were discussing an 80 decibel limit, so we have a little bit of a miscommunication there, perhaps, so I'll let her speak because I wasn't in that conversation. I do believe also that that last-minute submission of the sound map is what Alex said. It's his side taking 85 and plugging that into Bonnie's table 3 in her report, and then having Walbridge map that. I will also let Bonnie explain, but I think that that perhaps is not exactly how the science works. So I think for me at this time, and I'll let, again, her get into the science, but it's our position that we still need a little bit more time after it's clarified if 85 makes sense, if they were offering 80, or if that was just a misstatement. If the board thinks that either of those, and choosing a number and limiting it in that way, then we would need time for the expert to reapply that number into the table, because I don't think it's as simple as substituting the number in and then, subtracting, and you get to that map. So I'll say that. And then the only other thing, which Bonnie will get into also, was we do still have this sort of special event outstanding question. Besides being notified if there's an application coming in, I'm not sure that my clients are necessarily comfortable, nor should they be expected to be comfortable without understanding if, because the village doesn't have a code provision, to a specific decibel, right, that it's a that you can't violate the code just by, someone standing at the property line and reading the decibel. If the board does not in some way, perhaps limit either the number of special events per calendar year, or, between Memorial Day and Labor Day, a certain number of events being allowed, or using only the in-house speakers, which are the subject of this whole discussion. If we are assuming that not the religious ceremony itself, but the celebration and the reception after, if there's going to be live music and DJs and things like that, and if this is this beautiful, outdoor space that may attract more users or not, that if it's every weekend, all summer, every year, in perpetuity. I think, like I said in my cover letter, with my most recent submission, we would rather just have the opportunity to understand more of that and hash it out now, so that they're not just stuck calling the police, at a later date. So that's all I have.
Great.
Thank you.
Would you like Bonnie to speak next?
It's up to you guys
If I think I'd like to have a little more clarification about this sound and transmission through the neighborhood.
Okay, so Dr. Bonnie Schnitta is here. Those sound sense reports are from her. I gave Pam a copy of her resume for the record. She has copies if you all are interested. I don't know if you're familiar with her or not. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Schnitta. I'm the owner and founder of SoundSense, an acoustic engineering firm. 39 Industrial Road, and we're unit number 6.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Okay, so I have had Sarah, who's one of our engineers, provide you my curriculum vitae. Just as an overview to give you a better perception of my level of expertise, I have a bachelor's degree in math, a master's degree in mechanical engineering with focus on vibration and modeling, and my PhD work was signal processing, where you mathematically model signals and noise. So that's my background. My initial work was Department of Defense, and one of the consulting jobs I had was for DARPA. And for DARPA, this is the one thing that wasn't classified, so I get to talk about it, was where we put phones in the ground in Norway, and we were monitoring Russia to see if there was nuclear explosions or TNT explosions. I only mention that because it's a singular aspect of a signal processing analysis. And this book is a summary of work that we did over time, this book. So I'm using that as a background to let you know that when we're talking about numbers and we say the law of physics tells you what the transmission loss is at a certain distance, that I personally call that an estimator. So someone calls me up, I want to buy a house in this location, road noise is bothering me. We're not going to charge them for a consultation if it turns out that we're going to say, oh, you know what, you can't do anything. We use the estimator to determine if something could potentially be done. And then we use a very complicated, it's called sound plan analysis, to determine exactly what needs to be done and in what frequencies. So I mention that because when we start using numbers, it's to help us get a good idea how good or bad or ugly something could potentially be acoustically. So it is important to know that the neighbors are not asking for inaudibility, and I would fight that with them if that were the case, because there's even such a thing as phantom noise, where if you're worried about something, you're going to hear it whether it's there or not. They're asking that they not be disturbed, and there is criteria that kind of lets you know best what that disturbance would be. It's so many dB above background. Now, we took readings of, this is daytime, we took readings of the LEQ, that's the average, and the L90, which is in my world of acoustics, has to do with whether or not you're going to be disturbed by something, because it looks at the percentage of when an event, does occur 90% of the time, that type. So the 53 that was referenced is the LEQ, the average, but the L90, which is what we would look at in terms of something being a disturbance, that was closer to, I think it's either 40 or 42, I have it right here, it's 40, daytime. Now, when I did a job for the Maidstone Country Club, and there it was inaudibility, and we had to put a pump in a pump house and make sure nobody was disturbed by it. 2 or 3 in the morning, they drove me around on the golf course, and we took readings. And I know from that and my years of being here since 1981 doing this, that it's typically anywhere from 4 to 8 points drop between daytime noise levels and nighttime. So if we're using that as a criteria, we then go and we look at what is, what's possible. It's a little closer to 80 dB. And can I say it's 80 dB and that's what it should be? No, what I'm saying is that tells us that it's possible using the estimation with physics, but that I strongly believe we should be given more time now that we have a better idea what the speakers are that's being used to do the proper analysis. And you're kind of like going, well, you have the speakers, so why don't you just quickly do that? It's more complicated. So when you look at those numbers based in physics, that's the linear aspect of acoustics. But acoustics is not linear. There are anomalies. So what are things that can happen? Everyone's familiar with the whisper point. You go into a room and you stand at one end, it's usually a dome, and you can hear it at the other side, even if someone is just whispering and they can really hear it. That's an anomaly. Then there's reverberation amplification. When I looked at the data that was provided by the architect, I did not see that there was an acoustic engineer. I would have preferred to, because I would like to know that there would be speech intelligibility. when an event is happening, because the tendency is there's too much reverberation. The tendency is to raise the noise level. I think for the aging community, speech intelligibility is an important thing. So we're concerned about anomalies. We're concerned about speech intelligibility because that would amplify it, and then reverberation amplification in that area. And secondary are the environmental, like how is the sound being bounced off of another building? So I think some extra time needs to be had to specify that, and also for the frequencies, because you can have a standing wave or superposition tells you whether or not something can be canceled or additive. And I'm very comfortable looking at the numbers, the estimation that an agreement could easily be made. Mike Brody from Crescendo, I have the highest regard for him and his integrity, so I know we could work something out and be very comfortable. So it's like, yay, this all sounds very good. I leave you with my concern from all my years of doing outdoor analysis for people, and I refer to a situation with Paul Monty of Gurney's when they had an event and we told them what to do in one area, and then I worked with the DJ to set the limits so that nobody was bothered by it. What's the problem? After I leave, they crank it up. So I taught Paul Monty where to go and stand and how to look at certain numbers on an app so he could go back to the DJ and said, no, you must have raised it. So if the conclusion is a DJ is not allowed to come in, but they have to use the existing system, which will have a limiter on it, well, then that's pretty good. But of all the years that I've been doing, applications such as this, there's usually a very strong criteria specific to how many events, what is the level that's going to be accepted, et cetera. And I think I'm concluding in my mind, from my years of experience, that whereas the Jewish Center, as they are working with Crescendo, that with a proper analysis, you could easily come up with a great agreement that allows the Jewish Center to enjoy this wonderful design and space. I would love for someone to do speech intelligibility, because I was one of the authors on a book through the Acoustic Society on houses of worship, and one of the great things that they did was to put speakers in the floor. This was for a synagogue, because you're talking about it's 6 feet to the ear as opposed to the 12-foot distance. But that's a separate thing. That's just me wanting it to be right. But with all of that, I worry deeply about special events, because I personally have been involved over and over again where I have worked with a DJ. Some are great and they listen to me and they abide by it and they stay there, and others who don't know me after I leave go, ha, this is great, now I can do what I want to. So I think that's where my deepest concern is. I know I can work with Mike Brody once we do a further analysis to come up with something that'll not disturb the neighbors, but will make the Jewish Center very happy. I'm just deeply concerned about special events. And I put my card in there, so if after, you want to shoot me an email, go, well, what about this? I'm more than happy to answer that in any way. But are there any questions now?
I have one. So you mentioned sound and the environment around, obviously buildings, landscaping, trees, whatever. How much does that affect these numbers that we're seeing presented to us?
A lot. Yeah, especially, and I didn't mention one thing, that because of the close proximity to the ocean from all my years of doing this, there is a certain time of day and certain conditions where the waves will actually be bent up and then down. So it is possible that you could, maybe someone's taking a reading to see if you're in compliance at one location on the Jewish Center property, but then you go onto the neighbor's property and bang, it's really loud. But we've been doing this long enough that we could take that into account. It takes time. Our first goal and our perspective was, is this even possible, and what is the kind of guidance we should give? So when we saw the number of speakers and we saw 95 and then we popped it in the estimator, it was like, whoa, nope, But the buildings make a big thing, and I'm concerned about the fact of the shape. If there's potential, some anomalies, that would make superposition additive. And that then being the case, it means that it would make it worse. Just like there's a difference between some restaurants. The ones I treat, you can actually hear someone talking, and there are other ones that are really loud and you can't. So that type of a thing. So I am very worried.
Great. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions?
I had a question.
And then I have a question.
The Jewish Center also offered to limit the use of base.
Oh, absolutely. I think that was part of the...
And is that helpful in your opinion?
It is one of the major things that need to be done. And you know, superposition isn't something you're stuck with. Most people know the subtractive piece of superposition, which is also called noise canceling or a standing wave, where it's this opposite phase and it just all of a sudden you can't hear a certain frequency. Superposition is when it's amplified. So that's the kind of thing you would look at, and there maybe because of the shape and everything else of the ceiling and the way it interacts with the adjacent buildings, maybe there is a case for additive superposition that normally would be a bad thing, but you can adjust it in the speakers for that frequency of concern.
So I had a question. I'm sorry, were you finished? So they're talking about 85 versus 80, and then we got this chart just the other day using 85. But is 85 the real number that you should be using? Because in reading your report, it seems like if you have a number of speakers, I don't know what's going on here. If you have a number
we'll come right up to get that feedback.
It takes the 85 and elevates it to a higher number based on the number of speakers, or do I not read
Right,
that
so they have
correctly?
agreed to a lesser number of speakers and an adjusted position of the rabbi. Again, like I said, we were just looking at generalities to know what is real. Just like when someone calls us up and says they want to buy this house on Montauk Highway, and is it even possible that they could do anything? We will not take on a consultation if our answer is going to be, yep, it's what we thought, can't do a thing. We pop it in our estimator and look at it, and if we feel it's in that range, then we know with some more sophisticated analysis that looks at the nonlinearities and takes into account the topology as well as the adjacent buildings and the trees, et cetera, then we know we can make a difference. And we even know what frequencies. Like we'll say, okay, we can handle all these frequencies except these. So whereas normally we'd say never ever use water feature to solve a problem, a road noise problem, we can basically bring everything down except certain frequencies, and then we advise them on the frequency that the waterfall needs to be to make that difference. So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody
Any other
else have any
questions?
No? Thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much.
Alex, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
I'll ask Mike to speak.
Sure.
My favorite part.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Michael Brody, 93 Evergreen Avenue, East Moriches, New York. Oh, I'm sorry. My gosh, this is America. I should go like this as well. Michael Brody, 93 Evergreen Avenue, East Moriches, New York.
You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. How's everybody doing today? We had a couple of changes that we made since the last meeting, and that's a result of listening to the neighbors on Borden Lane, also, and reading the Sound Sense report. And I also have mutual respect for Dr. Bonnie Schnitta, and I've worked with her before. So a couple of things that I just wanted to discuss quick that were touched upon before. I'd like to clarify a few things and just announce some of those changes to be a little bit more accurate. First, we did change the position of the speakers on the pavilion, and we wanted to do that, so we wanted them to fire towards the building instead of firing out on the lawn like they previously were. We thought this would have a good effect. I don't know, again, I don't have a math formula to talk about this. However, I do know if I stand behind a speaker or different directions, I'm going to hear it differently. It's going to have different drops of sound. So we believe that this would help decrease some of the noise pollution, if you'd like to call it that radiates from the center. We also adjusted, as people mentioned, the speaker count to 14. When we shifted the pavilion this way and placed the speakers, our overall goal, like we discussed in the last meeting, is to have a quantity that's equally surrounding the listeners. This way we can keep the volume as low as possible, but allow them to hear the rabbi, let's say, or any of the, if they're going to use music or anything to that effect, right? We reduced the max decibel level capability of all the speakers to 80 decibels. I'm saying the number 80 because what we've done, what I have done and what the map shows, and I know we mentioned 85 before, but 80 decibels is at the reference point that is 12 feet from the speaker. We noted this because I wanted to follow the tables that Bonnie presented. I wanted to keep everything level, so this way when we looked at the data, you can see the data more clearly, okay? So 80 is the decibel level that we would measure 12 feet below the speakers, and then the sound radiates from there.
So we're going to limit the decibels to 80?
The maximum. We're limiting the maximum volume that we can produce from all the speakers 12 feet below to 80 decibels.
So what does that limit the output from the speaker? Is it at 80 or is it at 85?
The speaker output, we're changing how we're saying that. We're following Dr. Schnitta's method of measuring the speaker at the 12-foot reference point. So if you refer to her document, her presentation, you'll see that she shows her target level to start at 12 feet from the speaker. And what she mentioned is we want to follow her method of measuring with decibels in the A weighting, which she discusses in her document. So we'll be doing that at the 12 feet. So we'll establish a volume at 12 feet below, or decibel rating, I'm sorry, not a volume, as the maximum level that the speakers can play. And then, as you'll see, as I just run through this, and I'll try to be a lot quicker, I'm sorry, we'll get to what that result is as the sound travels. So I also wanted to confirm another thing, that the electronics are what is going to control these speakers. It allows us to create a limit. So it's allowing us to set the decibel limit. We'll be using a decibel reader, and then we'll be using the amplifier to stop it and cap it at that 80 decibels. Okay, that product also is what's letting us adjust the frequency and capping that frequency. We discussed that last time. The only people that can adjust this is an audio-video company. The Jewish Center of the Hamptons can't go in here and crank it up like we were just talking about, where the DJ came in and said, let's turn this up. So this is going to be a stated maximum level that these speakers can play, okay? The other thing that we've done, as asked by the board, was we created a predictive map of sound. And on that map, when you take a look at it, you will see that it's noted at the 80 decibels level, A-weighted, 12 feet from the reference target. So this way, we wanted to just show everything on the same plane as Bonnie discussed, all right? So we can keep it level. So before I just talk about the quick map, a couple of other things that I found interesting in the report was Bonnie had a table 1, the decibel change of 0 to 3 decibels is barely perceptible. Sound level increase between 0 and 3 decibels has no need for mitigation because it's barely perceptible. Again, I thought it was comfortable to continue to use her material because it helps make these predictions easier to understand. And finally, the last thing, when she mentioned LEQ at the front of the Buell residence is 53 decibels, I thought this was an important number to keep in mind. So the updated map that we show at 80 decibels, 12 feet from the reference target, using the inverse square law, what it shows is at 300 feet, we're measuring decibels, they should be 53. That matches the LEQ that we talked about. And that's playing the speakers, measuring them at 80 decibels, 12 foot below. So if you follow the map and you follow the math now that we've all taken on the same level, that's what our predictive result is. So we're keeping the speaker level at maximum at the same level that you would read whatever was read that day at the LEQ of 53 dB. So I don't believe that that keeping it at that level would be annoying or noticeable to the property owners at the front of their yard, since we've now matched those and kept them in line. The other thing that I wanted to just touch upon was in item 8 of the Sound Sense report, again, and I enjoyed the report because I like to read this type of stuff, is Bonnie noted that if we have multiple speakers in the same area, depending upon the distance, they can have an anticipated increase of dB, and it could be potentially anticipated at 3 or 4. So I thought of this, I played some speakers, and I took some readings, and on a